everybody. It's me, your favorite artist, animator, and entrepreneur, writer, and everything under the sun. Today is going to be our final lesson. I know tears coming down my eyes. It's so sad. But um, I hope that you've been having fun with me learning about all the wonderful things about animation. So at the start of the class, we learned about what? Animation, the basics of animation, about stretching and timing and framing and all of that. And then we learned a little bit about art, the different types of art, the different types of software that can be used with art. And then I taught you a bit about Gimp, the art software that we'll be using for our animation. And then finally, we started going into spine, and I taught you the basics of spine. So these past few weeks have been really fun for me. I hope they have been really fun for you. And as always, we're going to do our favorite dance to get those juices flowing, right? So repeat after me. One, two, three. Oh, I wish I were an Oscar Mayer wiener. That is what I truly like to be. For if I were an Oscar Mayer wiener, everyone would be in love with me. All right, so we're nice and loose and we are ready to be creative. All right, so in this lesson, I'm going to be teaching you just some more advanced parts of spine animation, right? So we had our little kitty cat, and so we drew it in GIMP, and we rigged all the bones together, and now we're going to actually make it move, all right? So through the wonderful magic of editing, we are going to go from my background here into my room. All right, see you there. Ta-da! And here we are in my room again. All right, so I have here spine already open, and so we can see my lovely kitty cat. So you'll notice that you can see all the little bones and stuff attached to our cat here, right? If I wanted to make it disappear, or if they were in the way of what I wanted to work on, then you'll see here that there's a little eye icon right over here, right? And so if we don't want to see them anymore, all we have to do is click it, and now the bones are gone. They still exist because if you hover over where they're supposed to be, you'll see that they appear, right? But if you're not over them, then they don't show up at all. All right. If, for example, you also wanted to not be able to click because maybe you wanted to move this skin, this part of the drawing, without actually touching the bone, then you can also click here, right? And so now, even though you can see, you can't actually click the bones. You'll notice that the bones don't become highlighted, right? So that is all. If you wanted, you can do the same thing with the images themselves, where if I don't want to see these images, but maybe I only want to see the bones, then we can click here. And so now the images are gone, but the bones still remain, all right? And if I also wanted to not be able to touch the images at all, I can just click here, and now only the bones, as you can see, only the bones become highlighted. The skin or the images no longer become highlighted, right? All right, so we want to start animating, right? Because this is spine and this is our final lesson. So what do we want to do? The first thing that we'll want to do in this edition, this is Spine Pro, and for me, I want to be able to move my cat in as many different ways as possible. Currently, you'll see if I move the leg, the entire image of the leg moves. But if I move this bone right here, it doesn't move at all. Now, why is that? That's because the image is only attached to the one part of the bone and it's not a mesh. So it doesn't allow the other bones to influence its movement. All right. So let's undo this so it goes back into position, right? So to create a mesh or that we want of the image, right? What we'll do is say let's go for the tail because that will probably be the easiest to demonstrate the movement. All right, so we have our tail, right? And we have it selected. You can see it's highlighted. What we want to do is click mesh, right? Down here and click edit mesh. Now, when you click edit mesh, you'll notice that all these instructions come up, right? So because this is the first time that we're creating this mesh, what we'll do is click new because it's a new mesh like that. All right, so you'll see here, you'll notice on the cursor that there's a little kind of green dot right in front of the mouse. So you want to click, and now that becomes one point of your mesh, and it will automatically drag along with you. So you want to try and get it as close to the actual image as possible where you want the tail to bend. So in this case, the points that we have here is the points that we would want the or image to bend and morph. So we're just putting it here. You want to make sure that it's as close to the actual tail as we can get without overlapping anything, right? And you just go around, just go around, and you keep doing that, right? Until you have completely engulfed the image, all right? So when you've engulfed the image, this happens. So the image, the other parts of the image return. So let's zoom in a little bit. So this is now our new mesh. You'll notice that there are these little triangles and vortices that are created when we have that. Now, this is a really cool thing about Spine is because now we're kind of making this kind of into a pseudo or half 3D image. Now, you'll notice that what these triangles mean is that they will now this image right here will now stretch according to where these triangles are, right? It may seem a little complicated now, but trust me, with practice, you'll get it. So we have this surrounding here, but I also want to create some more vortices, some more vectors. These little things, these dots right here are your vectors. So what I want to do to make it more accurate when the tail starts moving is you hold this, you'll notice that you're also now will be, instead of it being new, because it's no longer a new mesh, it's now modified. So you have modified clicked and it allows you to adjust the vortices. So you click and you'll notice that if you move it, this happens because you're now the vortices are now overlapping the images. So what you want to do to create a new vortice, right? You click create. You notice that your cursor now has a plus sign on it, right? and you can drag, you'll see me dragging, you can now drag the vortex to where you want it to be. So you want to drag it for all of them, right? So I drag them to where the joints of that tail is. You don't have to do this yourself, but just in this case, that's kind of how I want it to bend. I want them to bend where the bone is. And again, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, and you can always adjust it as you go along. But for now, just to teach you, this is how you create a mesh. So this seems pretty satisfactory. Sometimes as you get more experience, you may want to use more vortices. Sometimes you may want to use even less vortices. Sometimes you may realize that, oh, I don't need all these points to allow the tail to move how I want it. And that's perfectly fine. If you feel that you have way too many vortices, all you have to do is click delete, and you'll notice the parts that you may want deleted become highlighted. So if I delete here, then yeah, that vortice is now gone, and you can see that the triangle shape has it now has a new shape. So if I click here, now the triangle has a different shape, right, in this area. But for now, I do want to create one here. So you can create another one, and I can create it here. And you'll notice that it doesn't necessarily go back to the position that I wanted it in, right? Even though the triangles may reappear how I want them to reappear. With that, that's why we have modify, right? So with modify, it allows us to move it in the position that we want it to be in, right? So we can move it closer or farther away, just depends on what we want to accomplish with our mesh. All right, so you'll notice that there are other buttons here that you can reset it if you want to. You can actually have it trace the tail if you wanted to as well, if you don't trust your own tracing skills. And you can have it generate new vortices within the mesh itself. All of these things, as you become more advanced, will start to make a little more sense, right? Okay, so once you've created your mesh, all we have to do is click close, and that mesh is there, right? You'll notice that the mesh is there, but also an outline of the image that is working for is there as well, right? So if if I wanted to pose the tail, you'll notice that, okay, the tail still, it moves, but the other bone still doesn't seem to be influencing that tail. So what could be happening? We're gonna undo that to move it back into position. All right, so what you need to do now is add weight to the mesh that you've now created, right? So if we have weights, you want to click weights, right? And so now you'll notice that you can, any mesh that is around, you can now, it becomes highlighted. So none of these are weighted, so they don't get highlighted, but this one has a mesh. So now we can tinker with it. So you click it, and you'll notice that the weights here pop up, right? So what we want to do is bind these bones to our tail, right? So there's this bone, this, do, 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 right? And you'll see that they all appear right here, right? So in order to bind these bones to this mesh, we now click bind again. All right, so you saw how quick that was, where it was calculating the mesh for the weights for the meshes. So you'll notice that each tail or each bone has a color assigned to it, right? And you'll also notice that, oh, wait a minute, there's colors assigned here as well. So you can see, if we zoom in a bit, you can see exactly which vortice is affected by which bone. And that's pretty amazing because now look here, you'll see that this bone 100%, and you'll see the number here, 100% has influence over these vortices here. But this one, it controls it a little bit less than 100% because this bone also has an influence over it. So what does all of this mean? You'll notice now when we try to pose, before we could move the tail, this part of the tail with this bone, but now, let's undo, we can now influence the tail with this bone. Isn't that amazing? See where it now moves on its own. And if we wanted to, let's undo, we could select all of these bones by holding control and dragging over it. And you can, let's hold it here. And now all of this moves. Isn't that super cool, right? So that is the importance of meshes and what it allows us to do in our animation. And that is why we add meshes to our stuff. All right, so I'm going to undo this to put it back in the right position that it was in. And as you can see, we have that. And I am going to do the same thing to all these other images, right? Okay, so in order to do that, let's go to our body, and again, we create mesh and edit mesh. New, if we want, as I said, you can trace it. So if we wanted to trace it, you see all that detail that came up. You can change the detail, how much you want it to trace, and you see all these vortices come up. Or if you don't think you need all of it, I'll just do it here because that's still more than enough. Let's actually go here, go here, right? And press OK. And we can always create more. So if we wanted to create more, just click create. And if we want to create less, just click delete, and we'll delete that one. You don't want to necessarily have too many vortices because also they take up a lot of space. So they take up a lot of RAM, and that can slow down the performance of your animation. And you don't necessarily want that, okay? So we did that with the body. And as I said, remember, you click X, then we can add some weight to it. So let's do that. And now let's click bind, and then we pick our bones and click bind again. And so now, as you can see, let's see here. If we want to rotate, then yep, it's influenced by that. All right, so let's see here. This bone, as we can see, seems to influence all these bones here. Let's put it back in position. But you'll notice that I wanted to move this bone. That's funny. I wanted to move this bone, but wouldn't it make sense if I move this bone that these feet would move as well? But you'll be like, oh, wait, Chris, you already had this bone as a parent bone for these bones, what do we do? All right. So in order to switch from these bones to become now the parent bone of here, what we do is you click this bone and you click set parent. So set parent button right here. And now you can choose a new parent bone. And so right here, I'll click that as a parent bone, right? I want to do the same for here. So I click it and I click set parent. And now I pick this bone as that parent. All right. And so now when I move this bone, it should influence these two forearms, right? Awesome. Isn't that super cool? Meow, 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 right there. All right, so let's go undo so that it moves back into position. All right, I want to do the same thing with the feet. So let's go to mesh. Let's edit mesh. Let's trace. Yeah, that seems good enough. Okay. And let's create one here just in case. And let's drag it across just so that we can have more control over the triangles that we create, okay? All right, so X, let's bind that. So 1, 2, 3, let's bind, and there we go. All right. Just to test it to make sure that it works. That works. All right. Let's do it with this leg. Okay. Mesh, edit mesh, trace. That looks good. All right. And now close. You want to bind it. So 1, 2, 3, bind. And you can see this is all pretty simple and pretty easy, which is one of the reasons why I love spine so much. Because a lot of the things are, once you've learned them, they're pretty straightforward, as you can see. So it really just takes practice to make sure that you kind of get it right. Okay, so again, click OK. I don't think I need this one here. So I'm going to delete this vortex right here and just leave this as is. Close it, bind, 1, 2, 3, bam, bind. And so it's binded again, right? Okay, and then let's see, last but not least, we're gonna do the background leg. Okay, edit, trace, make sure it traces, all right, click OK. So I don't like that it didn't add right here, so I'm going to create, boom, and now we have a place where the joint can bend, all right? Okay, so actually, you know what, let me demonstrate. What would happen if we didn't have that vortex right there? How would it look in the animation, right? So let's close this. So now, if we were going to add the weights and we're going to bind it just so that we can show you what would happen, right? So we don't have a vortex right here. We're going to tell it to bind. What would happen? Would it bend normally? What do you think? So there's no vortices right here, but there is one here and there is one all around. Well, let's see. Okay, let's move. You see how weirdly that bends? That doesn't bend like a normal cat. That actually looks horrifying. Ugh, oh, poor cat. Okay. All right. So that is why we add our vortices the way that we do. Now, luckily, it's not too difficult to edit this mesh. All you have to do is click on it. you'll see edit mesh right here, right? So you click that, and then you create. Boom. And so you'll see the triangles, and now you know how, in theory, how it should bend, right? So you have one, two, three, four, five major triangles here. And when we now, let's see, let's bind, see if we can bind that. And nope. If you wanted to manually move that, what you can do is also just drag it upwards and use it, drag the weight over here, as you'll see. And you'll notice both that the percentage of influence here increases, but also you'll see in the mini pie chart here that it also increases there as well. Okay, boom. And so now that it's binded, you'll see that it should move a lot more smoothly. Boom, there we go. Or at least a lot more like kind of a human leg, right? Okay, so let's go back. There we go. We've now added meshes to our body or tail. I'm going to just for now leave the head alone since we shouldn't need that too much, right? And now we're going to actually get into the animating. You're like, oh, this is an animation class. Where's the animating? All right, so to animate, you'll see here, this is a setup phase. You want to click that. And now we're in the animation phase, right? This is how it looks with the animation board. So we want to, let's see here. Put in the background. I want to put that down. You'll drag down and you'll notice animations, right? But animations is now blank. So what we want to do to make a new animation or our first animation is click new. New, and you'll click animation. And it'll allow us to name it whatever we want to name it. So let's name this walk, I guess. You can name that walk. And now click OK. And now you'll see walk animation is right here. So what we'll do, you'll notice that we have the different seconds. This is each frame. This is frame 0. And all the way up to this is frame 30, this is frame 60. And you can tell it that the default setting should be 30 frames per second. So right here from 0 to 30 represents 1 second of animation, right? You'll want to also make sure this is the current pose that the cat is in, right? So you want to make sure that it stays that way. And you want to make sure that auto key, right now it's not highlighted. You want to make sure that auto key is highlighted, because what that does is that it makes sure that your pose stays in the position that it should be in, right? So one of the things that I do in order to make sure that the animation takes off is you want to press Control and you want to make sure that everything, let's close these for now. You can close things, open and close things by right clicking them. So you just right click, right click, right click. What I want to do is make sure my pose is selected. And I want to make sure, oops. I want to make sure that let's turn off image clicking for now. Uh-oh. I want to, go back to 0, which is very important, and make sure that now Oh boy. Now we highlight. There we go. So you press Control and you drag it all the way around. And you'll notice that now all of the bones are highlighted. And that's important because we want the bones, which is going to move the animation, we want that to be the one that is highlighted, right? So with that highlighted, we want to make sure that it's at 0, right? And we want to make sure, let's see here. What's happened here? Just to go back, new animation. Let's call it to walk. There we go. So now that I accidentally undid a walk animation, that's why it wasn't there. So you'll notice now that we have the walk animation, that now we have all these keys right here, right? And you'll maybe notice keys from when we're talking about earlier keyframes. That is one of the things that kind of come into play here. So you want to make sure on frame 0, that you lock the pose or lock the bones in the pose that you want it to be in, right? And in order to do that, you just click the keys. I click it for all of them. You don't have to, but just for rotate, you mainly need it for rotation and for translation. You don't always, I mean, depending on what type of animation you're doing, you tend to use scale and share a little less. But in order to cement it, or in order to make sure that it stays in that position for frame 0, we want to make sure that we click all of it. And you want to make sure that it's red. If it's not red, then it's not fully locked, right? All right, so this is frame 0, right? And now we're going to go with frame 10. We'll just skip forward to frame 10. And now we're going to pose this cat in the position that we want it in, right? Remember in the animation section of the class where I spoke about keyframes and making sure that we have the poses that go into each other? Well, that's what we're doing currently, right? So we have frame 0, which is over here. We have frame 10, which is over here, right? We can now create frame 20. So let's put our frame, let's go back down here. And now we can put our other frame here and put this one over here. Right? And let's see, we have that frame there, that frame there. Let's see, let's put this one behind a little bit. Okay, so we have our 0 frame, we have 10, then we have 20, and let's go with a 30, right? So let's see, I would want it to return to neutral, right? So for frame 30, you can see we have all these, we have 1, 2, 3, and then you kind of, to end it, you want kind of a loop frame. So usually what that is the first frame, you have it as the end frame, right? And let's see, let's copy this frame, make sure that it is highlighted and that everything is highlighted in it, as you can see. We then click copy, and then on frame 30, we can click paste right here, right? So you'll notice you have one pose, second pose, or third pose, and then it returns to neutral. Now, this doesn't guarantee that it'll look good, but watch this. When I press play, oh, you'll notice that it moves on its own. And if I wanted to, I could loop it. So by clicking loop, it'll now loop. So there we go. We have a moving cat. Of course, it'll take practice. Don't worry if you don't think the animation looks super great now, because like with all things, it's going to take practice, right? So that is one way to get the cat moving. Um, as I said, this doesn't look super smooth, and part of it is because the frames aren't in the position that we want it to be in right now. You can adjust it, however, and that's a wonderful thing about this, is that you can adjust it as many times as you want until it looks as natural as you want it, right? So let's see. Maybe I want to add another animation in between. So that could probably be, let's drag this so you can hold on to it and drag it to the 10th, your other frame, right? And maybe we want to adjust this frame right here because we didn't necessarily like it, but we didn't hate it, right? So we copy and paste it here. Boom, right? So now let's test that. How does that look? Not quite where we want it yet, but that's a wonderful thing about animation is that we can keep working on it until we have something that we like. All right. So let's move from walk and let's create another animation, right? Because we have here our tail. So let's see. We want to create a new animation. So we can click new or click animation and click new and new animation. And let's call this one tail, right? So we click tail, okay. And now we make sure to highlight it again by pressing Control and highlighting everything and making sure that frame 0, everything is at where we want it to be. All right. Excuse me. So we want to mess around with the tail for a bit. So we can do that. And we can, let's pose it in a different position. So let's go here for now. And then, so from here to here, then let's pose to rotate. Let's see, 1, 2, let's bend the tail back this way. I don't worry if it looks perfect or not, because the point is not to look perfect, it's to get it on the paper, all right? So let's see, let's highlight, Control, there we go. And now we can paste we can copy this pose here. So let's copy that. And then on 30, you pose there, right? So now you have 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can copy this layer here. Let's copy it over to 40, all right? Oof. So with a few clicks of our button, we now have a tail that moves on its own, right? Isn't that super cool? And so now you're animating this tail without actually having to do much actual drawing frame by frame animation. You just pose it in the section that you want. Say we're like, okay, this looks weird that it just does that right there. Maybe what you can do, you can also highlight a section. So you do that by dragging it over to the sections that you want, right? And we can then move it over here, say if we wanted to, right? Now, because you have such a gap between here and here, it's going to just, if we don't fill it, it's just going to move it more slowly, right? But if we wanted it to kind of stay in that position for a while and then go back, you can highlight that frame here, and let's put copy, and there you can paste it there, right? So now let's look at it. And so now it does that. Not super smooth, but as I said, you can always tinker and adjust it to how you want it to look. So let's say if I did this, I highlighted more than one, and so now I can move more than one bones at the same time, like so. And now let's see, if I go back, how does that look? See, that looks a little more natural, right? Looks a little more like a cat's tail. All right, so boom, boom. Let's move this. And let's do it here. So yeah, like that. Okay, let's try that. Yeah, I think that looks way more natural. All right, and so to get it looking like it's looping, you want to make sure that the first frame is also your last frame. And there we go, paste. All right, so now when you play it, it looks so much more natural, right? Because it looks like it's actually looping into each other. So let's take out the bones for a bit so you don't see the bones. And now we have our cat and its tail is moving around like an actual cat's tail, or kind of like a cat's tail, right? All right. So that is some of the very basics of animation. As I said, if you want to, you can always, let's see, the tail now moves. Um, let's see what else we can do. So you'll notice this is 60 frames of animation right here. So that is about 2 seconds of animation, right? That looks like, yeah, that looks like 2 seconds of animation, right? So let's do another one. Okay, let's see if we wanted to duplicate the tail animation, we could do that, but we don't. We want to create a new animation right now. So let's see, animation, and we'll call this one, I don't know, happy cat, happy cat, I don't know. All right, so we do that, right? And so again, we want to make sure that our frame 0 is highlighted. So we control and we drag our bones to make sure that they're all selected, and you make sure that they're all, that you lock all the frames, right? So what do we want to do with this one? Let us have this one prance a little bit. So it's a happy cat. So in this frame, I want the cat on its feet. So we want to make sure that, okay, let's move that there. Move that there. You want to make sure that where the feet are right here kind of matches up with where the feet will be right here, right? So right here, right here. If you want to, you can also use translate and move this down a little bit. So, okay, it's not the end of the world, but all right, so that's one frame right there. All right, the next one, let's see, let's have our cat move. Oh, not with the translate, even though that would work. We're going to rotate it. So rotate, and let's rotate this, and let's move this forward, right? Let's move, no, that doesn't need to move. All right, so let's have it here, let's have it here. So let's see, 1, 2, 3. All right, let's test that. How does that look? I think that looks fine, right? Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3. Let's see, let's move this one a little bit more, right? And then again, we want to make sure that our feet are in the position that they were in before, right? So we translate it and we move it back here. We go back to the previous keyframe to make sure that it looks natural. Okay, yeah, that looks natural. All right, and oh, undo that. Let's rotate. Let's rotate. There we go. There we go. And let's see. We want the cat to look like it's looking a little bit more, not at us, but to the side. So let's zoom in a bit. And to zoom in, all you have to do is Control and right click and just drag it to where you want it to go. Right click moves the canvas where you want to go, but Control right click allows you to zoom in, okay? So let's zoom out a little bit. I want our eyes and our pupil and our nose. I want these three to move at about the same area, right? So let's translate that and let's move them to the side, right? All right, awesome. And now I want the pupils to look over here, right? And let's move our eyebrows up because our cat is happy. Let's move that here. Boom. Okay, so our cat is moving. That's fine for now. Okay, awesome. So let's try this and see how it works. All right, so we move our cat and there it goes. Yeah. That looks just about right. Okay. All right, what else do we want? this cat to do. So it's on its feet, but this doesn't look quite right. So let's rotate this down a bit and rotate this up. In this case, I would tell you guys, oh, doesn't quite animate how I want it to, but that's perfectly fine. In this case, I would tell you guys to go watch a bunch of cat videos to make sure that you get cat movement as smooth as you can. That's your homework assignment. Go watch a bunch of cat videos, okay? All right, so let's see. All right, that seems right. Okay, that seems right. So that's second one. So now we can go to frame 40 and let's see. Let's move him up a little more. Let's move this a little more here. So just the head. Oh, no, that's the eyebrow. Oh, that's the eyes. You want to move the head bone, which is this one. There we go. Oh, it can be a little finicky, especially when you're not zoomed in. So that's why we zoom in, so we know exactly what we're clicking on, right? And let's give our cat a little playfulness. So move one arm up and like so. So boom, boom. Let's see. And maybe we want to have it do that and that while it's coming down a little bit, right? Let's see. All right, how does that look? So we can now, you want to make sure also that you're constantly saving. Boom. You can also set it to autosave. So you can set it to like autosave every 5 minutes, and that's perfectly fine. So we want to see how does that look. So you go back here and you jump to the start, right? And now we click play, make sure our loop is on, and there we go. Our cat is animating, right? That's super cool. All right, so now let's have the last frame be the cat returning back to this position. So in Spine, you don't necessarily want to put it back at this one because you don't want the next frame or the last frame to necessarily be this one, the second to last. Because if you do that, let's see. If you want to make sure that all the bones are highlighted so that you select all of those bones in all of the position that they're posed in. But if we put them here, let's see. If we pasted them here, how does that look? Let's see. Oh, it actually doesn't look that bad. However, we can probably get it looking a little smoother if, let's go, if we added an intersection animation. So let's copy this one and put it here, paste it there, and then copy this last pose and made it frame 70. Boom. All right, now how does that look? Let's play that. And you'll notice it's a lot smoother, right? If we wanted to have because if we wanted to have it that it kind of pauses a little bit before it reloops, you can just create, oops, you can just create, oh there, you can copy this and just paste it a little further down. So let's see, let's paste it down here. So there's a good amount of pause between each loop. All right, so there we go. There we go. So there's our cat, right? All right, so if we wanted this to look a little faster, you can adjust things as you go along. So if you move down here, you'll notice that you'll see that all of this kind of, now we can see a lot more. And say you can adjust different sections of the animation or different sections of the frame by simply dragging it out if we wanted to, as you saw before. So if we did that, then what happens? You'll notice it gets very up. The pacing changes, right? The same way, if I wanted to, let's go back, let's pause that. If I wanted to, I could drag it down and I could drag it into a position. Let's move that so I can see more. I could drag it in a way that I could see, have it, let's see, between this section right here and this section. If I wanted here and here to move faster, what I could do, I can highlight here, right? And now you'll notice where you see those two arrows facing against each other, I can bring that in, all right? And let's say, let's move these back here. And now you'll notice this section should move a lot faster, all right? There you go. Now, what if, to me, I'm like, I kind of like how it looks, but I want him to do this motion here again, but I don't want to have to pose it again on my own. We can, let's highlight here so that we can add some space, right? And now I can select, just drag here, and you'll see all three are highlighted. And now I can copy and I can select where I want it to and I can paste. So now this loop animation right here has now been copied again. So let's see here. How does that look? There we go. So now he does it twice. Right. Isn't that cool? All right, so now he does the motion twice. And as I said, you can tinker with all of this. Make sure that if something doesn't move quite right, it may be because you don't have the proper bone selected, or you don't necessarily have the right pose, or you may have misselected something. But you can always undo, you can always redo, you can always move them in different sections, all right? So let's see. I like how that looks. All right, let's give him some, when he does that, let's give him some ear movement right here. So the ears in this frame, let's make sure we want these two. Let's make sure that in this frame that they are locked. I want them locked in that frame because I want them to just Let's move them just a little bit. Let's see, how does it look when we move it a little bit? Oh, definitely not too much. You can translate this as well. So you can move it down just a little bit. That's perfectly fine, right? Um, we can just rotate this here, rotate this here, select another, let's rotate that, rotate that there, and then if you want, say right here, you want to move it back to the original position, but you don't quite remember how it was, you can just them, take those poses from a previous frame and make sure they're highlighted and make sure that it's locked, and you can, with only those two bones selected by pressing Control and clicking on both of them, you can copy those bones and let's see, move them here, and you can paste them here. So you'll notice that they now have moved back to the original position that they were in, right? So let's see, how does that look? We'll go back to the beginning. Yeah, it's a subtle movement, but their ears move. So now our cat looks a little natural, right? Okay, so that is the happy or happy cat. So we're almost done with our cat here. However, what if I really like, because I forgot to animate the tail. And I'm like, I don't know how I want it to look, but I did like how the tail animation looked here. What do I do, right? So what you can do, what will we do? You can copy or this animation. So what we'll do is just click duplicate right here. So that will make a copy. And so now you'll see Happy Cat 2. Then we'll take our tail animation down here and you'll make sure that your tail is highlighted and you'll see that it's 60 frames. So what we'll do is copy those right there, make sure that all of them are copied, and then we go down to Happy Cat 2, right? And we want to make sure that this is where, right at the beginning, you want to paste it right here, right? And so you'll notice now, let's see if this works, that the tail now moves with both the happy cat animation and now with the tail animation, right? So that is so cool that you can now in less than in 30 minutes, we put a cat together and we had it animating and we have 4 different animations for our cat. And that was without having to draw all of them in different poses or any of that. And that is a wonderful thing about Spine. That is what makes Spine so cool. All right. You can have, as I said, the one pose. You can have the tail pose only if you wanted to, or you can combine the two of them together, right? And again, you can adjust all of this however you want as we go along, right? So we're satisfied with our animation, right? What do we want to do? We want to save, right? So you make sure you save this. And now, let's see. If we go to Spine and we now want to export our project because we want to see how it looks, right? So you can export it. And now if we wanted to export it into a video game, you would have it as a JSON file, right? However, we just want it as, if we wanted it as a GIF, um, an animated image, we would have it as a GIF. You can, if we just wanted it as a picture, we could have it as just a picture. As a Photoshop file, as a JPEG file, you can pose it however you want it. Or if you wanted to have it as a video, because this is animation, if you wanted to have it as a video, you can have it in both AVI and in MOV, all right? So let's pose this in AVI, right? And what shall we do? We'll have it as an animation, right? And we want to make sure that the animation is Happy Cat 2 or it's the current one. And the current one, as you can see highlighted down here, is still Happy Cat 2, right? So if I wanted to make it that it was only Happy Cat, then I would have highlighted that, but I don't need to do that. So we'll just use it as current, right? Now, if I also want to, where do I want to put this? Let's see, let's put it in my desktop here. And let's put it as cat. And let's save it there. Let's see, multiple sampling, no. Viewpoints, you want to, don't necessarily need to do that. But yeah, just for now, let's try it with, we have a white background and we have it at 20 frames per second, right? So let's export this and see how it turns out. All right, so as you can see, it's doing its magic. What it's doing, because it's 60 frames of animation, I'm sure it's 60 frames. What it's doing, it's basically drawing a picture of each individual section of that animation. That is what it's doing. And so sometimes it may, depending on the details that you have, it may take a shorter time or it may take a longer time. You may want to experiment with that. I do believe that we had this image of this cat at 300 DPI, which is a lot for, usually reserved for printing and for magazines and stuff like that, for books. If you want to just have it on your computer, usually 72 DPI is much more appropriate, and generally it will move much faster. So we're at 70% right now, and we just need to wait a few seconds, and hopefully with the magic of editing, it should be a lot faster. All right, hold on a sec. All right, and there we go. So we just completed our export, right? And now, if you remember, we had put that cat file, it should be on our desktop. All right, so there's our cat file right there. So if we click that, there we go, and there's my cat. All right, that's something is off. Let's go back. Something is off. It didn't quite get it how I wanted, so let's go back. Spine. All right. So wonderful thing about accidents is that they can teach us something. Okay, what did I do? No, viewpoint, crop, size, scale is, yeah, fit or scale. Did all of that. Compression, let's give it the low compression. Let's increase this to 30 frames per second. And but we don't need audio because there's no audio. Okay, let's see. And let's have it that it opens after export. We can also do this with the other file type. Oh, uh-oh. All right, API. Let's export that. Let's see how it does. All right, and so now you can see that once we have it exported, all you have to do is bring it up on your favorite movie player, and you can see that our cat, I have it in GIF form and I have it in movie form, but it's now moving on its own, like a pretty kitty cat should. So we've learned quite a bit today, and we've been learning quite a bit over the last few weeks. So as I said, you want to make sure that you save your file. You want to make sure that you export it. And as you can see, it's not nearly as difficult as you think it is, as long as you have the dedication and you put in the effort. So once, yeah, as I said, once we have that, you can experiment with Spine. As I said, this is the pro version. You can experiment with it as much as you'd like. It is quite a handy software, as you can see. So as I said, once you've exported it, you can put it, Spine can be used in animation. It can be used in just simple drawings. If you wanted to put the cat in a pose that it wasn't in before, you can use Spine to do that. Or you can use it in video games and animation and so forth. So it's just like with everything else, um, it just kind of takes time, right? And that's all we kind of have in life. So I just wanted to say how grateful I am to have worked with you, right? I know 2020 had been a challenge for most of us, and it can get pretty weird being stuck at home, I'm sure, not being around your friends or any of that. Some of us, we lost our loved ones. For me, I lost the most important person in my life, my grandfather, Alfred Luyten, a few weeks ago. And it can feel pretty hopeless trying to move forward. So, why do it? Why create in a world that doesn't always seem to care what we have to say, right? Because there is someone who cares. There is someone out there who admires what you do. And the content that we create as artists has the power to change the hearts and minds of the world. No matter how small you think your voice is, it can be hard to believe in ourselves. Like, believe me, I know. Especially when we think of the vastness of time and space. But remember, I believe in you. And if no one told you today, I love you. Not because of, what you can do, but simply because you deserve love. And so never forget that, all right? Now go out there and create, pour your heart and being into your art. And I hope that one day I'll get to see it. All right? Take care, everyone. And I love you. Bye.